Hello everyone, Stormwind1 here. Today we'll be talking about an upcoming pattern where a massive ridge will develop across parts of the central and western U.S. That could lead to a setup where we can see multiple cluster thunderstorms that could roll from the northern plains through the Midwest, even into parts of the Ohio Valley as well. And that can also bring more severe weather as well. Before we get started in this video, if you guys like weather-related content, you can subscribe to my channel. We do this stuff here all the time on this channel. Plus, we could have another update on this setup as well, so definitely stay tuned for any more updates as well. We're going to start with the watch warning advisory display. Generally mostly quiet across the country. We got some scattered severe weather issues for portions of the Midwest, or I meant the Mid-Atlantic. You do see some of those little orange boxes out there. Those indicate severe thunderstorm warnings. We do have scattered flash flood watches. That's what the dark green boxes are. But really, other than that, most of the country is pretty much quiet at the moment. A quick check at the tropics. We finally have Tropical Storm Bonnie. It's been a little bit since we talked about Bonnie. Where we were talking about Bonnie was way out here. It finally formed into a tropical storm. After all this time here, it finally formed to a tropical storm. It got better organized, and it now has a better low-level circulation. So now we have Tropical Storm Bonnie. With 40-mile-per-hour winds, with a central pressure of 1,005 millibars, so it's not a very impressive tropical system here. It will strengthen a little bit more before it makes landfall into Central America. Even beyond that, it could become a hurricane in the next couple of days into the Eastern Pacific as well. So that'd be pretty interesting as well. But Bonnie has no threat to the United States whatsoever. There's a little disturbance in the Windward Islands. Right now, it's a low 10% chance it'll be getting into an environment where it will not be favorable for tropical development. And there's another disturbance much closer to home along the east coast of Georgia and South Carolina. This also has a 10% chance of developing. It has a pretty nice circulation with it, but the conditions won't be favorable for tropical development over the next couple of days. But even regardless if it develops or not, it will bring in a lot of rain for areas along the East Coast, which that is a good thing because parts of the Carolinas are in a drought right now. So there's some good news there as well. But other than that, the tropics will stay mostly quiet here. And really overall, the models don't show anything for about 2 weeks. So we won't really be talking about tropics that much for the month of July. But that's tropics that way. Let's go ahead and move on to severe weather. This is the severe weather outlook for today. Got a slight risk for northeastern Wyoming, southwestern South Dakota, and northwestern Nebraska. And you got a broad margin risk that extends all the way into the Ohio Valley as well. There's even a margin risk for the northern part of Maine. Tornadoes are not expected today. If this thing is going to load for me, there we go. Uh, Damage winds will be the primary threat. Some areas could experience some hail and some of these storms as well, but right now it's not looking to be a big day or anything. Similar situation tomorrow, but tomorrow we actually have two different select risk areas. We got one for far eastern Montana into western Dakotas, and there's also a marginal risk for parts of Oregon, Washington, even the parts of Idaho, which is pretty interesting. But we do have that other select risk area that includes some of the bigger cities along the East Coast. That includes New York City, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Boston, and also Washington, D.C. is in that select risk as well. But really, the primary threat will be damage and winds. But there could also be some hail for some of those storms as well. And also, once again, tornadoes are not expected in any of these areas for tomorrow. Day 3, which is tomorrow, we got a couple of march risk area. There's a march risk for portions of the Northern Rockies into the plains, and there's another march risk for parts of the Carolinas, even into southern Virginia. The main threat would be damage winds and small hail. Not really seeing a tornado risk on Sunday. Right now, for days 4 through 8, it's predictably too low. However, if you do check out in the description here, they do mention the possibility for multiple Mesca-convective systems and Boeing clusters moving east-southeast or along the instability axis. And where that's located? Well, that's be from the northern plains into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley. That's the area we'll be watching really over the next several days, and this could last for a decent period of time as well. Wherever you check out some of the ensemble members or for the mean, It goes beyond the 10-day period, and that's what we'll be looking into today. But let's talk about those 500 millibar height anomalies first, because this is the one of the more important things. This is how we're going to get to this type of pattern. So for right now, we got a very impressive trough going on up at Canada. That's going to bring in a cold front that will drape across the northeast down into the Midwest and the Ohio Valley today and into tomorrow, which will bring in a low end severe weather risk for most areas, but better severe weather risk opportunity will be along the Interstate 95 corridor from Washington, D.C. up into Boston. And that trough will continue to move off to the east. And you do notice another trough does move into parts of the western U.S. by this upcoming weekend. So at least some of those areas will experience some rain. We also notice here a ridge does begin to develop over parts of the eastern U.S. And this will be the ridge to really keep an eye on, because this will move back to the west and it will amplify big time. And at around this point here, we already have this a little bit of a northwest flow setup that sets up from the northern plains, Midwest, even through parts of the Great Lakes as well. And that northwest flow setup, some of the more favorable conditions will kind of move south over time, at least for the first part of next week. And watch what happens as we get deeper to next week. This trough here will begin to back off by midweek, and whenever that happens, this ridge here will begin to move westward, and it will really amplify big time. And here it goes by Thursday. Here's Friday. And yeah, you can see here on Friday here, there's a lot of red on this map. There really is. And you also got that trough just really up in eastern Canada. That will kind of move deeper into the northeastern U.S. as this ridge here really begins to amplify big time. And that does continue into next weekend. And you can see there by Saturday, which we're a little bit far out at this point here, but there is a pretty strong agreement with this. And this is the GFS model, by the way, forgot to mention that. Um, but really by next weekend here, you get this massive ridge that develops in the western U.S., and it covers pretty much 2/3 of the United States. At the same time, you got this nice northwesterly flow here that covers the northern plains, the Midwest, into the Ohio Valley as well. And that's the area we'll be focusing on for the potential for multiple rounds of showers of thunderstorms. And some of those thunderstorms could be in big clusters, and they can bring some severe weather as well. And you can see here, even getting towards the 10-day period, you can see here the GFS model likes to keep that ridge going for a decent amount of time. Even a big trough tries to develop over the Great Lakes, but you never know if that will happen or not, especially if it's beyond 10 days as well. But even with that there, that northwest flow really sticks around for a while as well. I mean, even before this ridge here amplifies here big time, you still have this favorable northwesterly flow here. You also notice here, if you check out uh, near Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota, that's actually a cluster of thunderstorms right there, showing up at 500 millibars. So that's very interesting how the GFS is showing that up as well. But let's check out some other models, which the next one we'll be taking a look at is the European model. And pretty much you'll see pretty much the same thing. So here we go, getting into Monday here. You got not a very strong ridge, but there is a ridge in place across parts of the deep south that'll keep some areas hot and dry. But as you get into the middle of next week, especially late next week, this ridge here will begin to amplify big time once again. Here's Thursday here. You can see there you still have that big northwesterly flow here, and that's where conditions will be favorable for, for thunderstorm clusters. And then you get into next weekend, and you can see here a little bit different on this model run than some of its previous runs, but it still shows a pretty big ridge over parts, at least on this run here, has it over the central U.S. than the western U.S. compared to some of its previous runs, which is a little bit interesting as well. But even with that little westward shift there, you still have this really nice northwesterly flow here over parts of the Midwest into the Ohio Valley, even in the parts of the Great Lakes as well, shown by the European model as well. Let's talk about some ensembles here. Let's check out the GFS ensembles. And this will be the mean out of 20 members. And you'll see that very similar setup there to what the GFS was showing here. As you get to late next week, how that ridge really begins to amplify across parts of the central and western U.S., and that leads to a really nice northwesterly flow. And that's the area we'll be paying attention to for those big clusters of thunderstorms as well. Not only this will lead to a severe weather setup over parts of the northern plains, Midwest to the Ohio Valley, this will also bring a lot of heat as well. If you're going to live over parts of the central U.S., even in the just within that northwesterly flow, you're going to experience some hot temperatures for several days. Widespread temperatures will be in the mid to upper 90s. Even some places could get into the triple digit heat. And those heat index values will be quite elevated for a lot of areas as well. So that's going to lead to some widespread excessive heat, which we'll check out the CPC probability outlook later in the video to kind of give you guys a better idea with that. And you can see here, even beyond the 10-day period, it still shows that ridge share across parts of the central U.S., which, of course, over time, as we do get deeper into July, that ridge will begin to move slowly eastward. So a lot of that heat that's over parts of the Four Corner states, some of that will be moving farther to the east, and that'll give at least parts of the western U.S. a little bit of a break from the heat and hopefully a break from that drought as well. However, I can't really keep my promises on that. But regardless of that, I think some areas in this desert Southwest will have a chance to get some rain here if a solution were to verify um, as well. But you can see there, even beyond 300 hours, it still shows that nice northwesterly flow, which is very interesting. And that's pretty interesting because that's a very persistent pattern when you think about it. Here's the European ensembles. You can see here, pretty much the same thing here as we get into mid to late next week. You got that big ridge that develops off to the west. And you do have that nice northwesterly flow here over parts of the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, even in the northern plains as well. All right, so we've checked out those 500 millibar height anomalies. Let's talk a little bit more about that severe weather potential. So we're going to check out the GFS ensembles with the surface-based CAPE mean, and this is a mean of 20 members. And you can see here, over the next couple of days, you see that cold front there that kind of moves farther to the south just a little bit, but eventually it will stall out and come back north as well over parts of the eastern U.S. They'll bring in a decent amount of rain for some areas, and some of those areas could at least get some relief from the drought that's ongoing, especially over parts of the lower Ohio Valley. And here's the 4th of July, and if you live in the Midwest, it's going to be pretty hot up there. And there will be that risk for some strong severe storms, possibly over some of those areas as well, especially on the northern end of some of those higher instability values as well. So that'd be another thing to keep an eye on as well, especially if you're going to be celebrating the 4th of July on Monday night. A lot of areas will be dry. Some areas could be a little bit stormy as well. And this is when the northwest flow pattern really begins to take shape. So here's Tuesday here, and this is the mean here. And this is a pretty impressive mean here. You got a mean of 3 to 4,000 joules per kilogram. That's a pretty strong mean coming from the ensembles. It really is. You don't see that too often out there. But really the area you would need to focus on when you look into ensemble maps like this is on the northern end, because there's not nearly as much forcing in this area up here than it is, farther to the southwest, like in Oklahoma and Kansas or Arkansas. There's not much forcing in some of those areas, so you won't see much way of shower thunderstorm development. But on the northeastern side of some of those higher instability values, there's a little bit better lift, and there's also some wind shear out there as well. And there can also be a stationary front nearby as well, which will also really help increase those chances for clusters of thunderstorms. And some of those, of course, can be strong to severe. As we get into Wednesday, pretty similar situation here. You got widespread instability values of 2 to 4,000 joules per kilogram, especially across parts of the Ohio Valley in the Midwest. And once again, the area to focus on for that potential for clusters of thunderstorms will be on that northeastern quadrant of some of those higher instability values. That's the area to really pay attention to. You notice here, some of those higher instability values do begin to expand back up to the northwest. Now you start to see a mean of 2,000 plus over parts of North Dakota. So you could see cluster thunderstorms that may try to form up there, and you could tell here, it can go a long way too. If you got a cluster of thunderstorms that were to develop near the Canadian border, I mean, it's got it could last for a long time. It really can, unless something happens farther down the road, maybe a different cluster of thunderstorms. But if you had a cluster of thunderstorms that were to develop near the Canadian border, and if there's a lot of instability out ahead of it and nothing to disturb that cluster of thunderstorms, yeah, that'd be pretty impressive to see that. Which conditions can be favorable to see stuff like that to happen. And you can see here, some of those higher instability values could get up into several parts of southern Canada as well, which is very interesting. And really, at this point here, this is where your ridge really becomes amplified big time here over the Four Corner states as well. And really, at around this time period, this is where conditions will be really be favorable for those long-lived clusters of thunderstorms or mesoscale convective systems. Same thing. And I know I'm going to get some questions here. Are we going to see derechos in this time period? Which, if you do not know what a derecho is, it's a long-lived clusters of thunderstorms that bring in widespread damage winds. And within some of those damage winds, it could be 75 miles per hour or higher. The possibility is there we could see derecho type of events. The possibility is there, but exactly where and when is something we do not know. And that pretty much goes for the rest of those cluster thunderstorms that ANMR will spit out. In this range here, it's nearly impossible to really pinpoint where a cluster thunderstorms will form. However, from a broad standpoint, conditions will be favorable for those clusters of thunderstorms. So we'll probably have a better idea on the timing on some of those exact cluster thunderstorms in the short range than the long range. So just want to go ahead and get that out of the way, so because I'm probably going to get some of those type of questions. You can consider even beyond the 10-day period, it still shows that favorable northwest flow setup, and it's still over some of the same areas as well, which is very interesting. Definitely giving me some 2012 vibes over some of these areas. Which what happened back in 2012, you had widespread excessive heat, is extremely humid, temperatures were hot, you had some triple-digit heat in some places, and also come along with some clusters of thunderstorms, and some of those have been significant in 2012. So, yeah, it's if you're getting some slow areas for 2012, it's definitely something to really keep an eye on. It really is definitely something to keep an eye on. Which, of course, beyond 300 hours, uncertainties will begin to spread from there. But even by that point, you still have a pretty decent mean out there. I mean, 1,000 to 2,000 is still a pretty decent mean that far out as well. And once again, it's over some of the same areas as well. Okay, so let's talk about where the models have the greater confidence area for some of those higher rainfall totals. So we're going to once again check out the GFS ensembles. So this is the precipitation mean over the next 10 days. So we're just going to look at the 10-day period for now. Really, once again, the area I will focus on is some of those high rainfall amounts, especially in those red shades there. So kind of in this area right in here will be the area I would be focusing on, because it goes around that ridge of high pressure. Your ridge of high pressure would be over here, and it's a massive ridge as well. If I were to go back to the GFS ensembles, if I could find it real quick, here we go. And kind of go towards the, so let's talk about Saturday. So here's your ridge of high pressure. It covers a lot of real estate. It covers the Four Corner states, the Central and the Southern Plains, and the Desert Southwest. So what if a cluster of thunderstorms were to form near the Canadian border up in North Dakota. Well, where will it go? Well, it will fall along those northwesterly winds, and it will want to go around this ridge of high pressure, which you can see here whenever I put these arrows here. This is a massive ridge. It really is. And you can see here, they will go around something like this, kind of falling along um, these Millbar Heights out here. They'll kind of follow along with that. Now, of course, when they get closer to the Ohio Valley, they can also turn a little bit more south as well as they get closer to the Ohio Valley. So the overall track, if one were to form here, it, for an average track, it could look something kind of like this, just a little bit. Most clusters or thunderstorms will be a little bit different, but that could be an average kind of look. At least what a normal cluster, which, compared to past several years, the most popular track for cluster thunderstorms are actually kind of something like this. They do turn a little bit more south in the Ohio Valley, more towards Kentucky, on average down there. That's pretty typical to see that. If you were to go back to the precipitation mean, you kind of see that similar scenario here. Some of those precipitation accumulation amounts and those darker purple colors, even the red shades, you kind of see there, they do turn a little bit more south as they do get into parts of the Ohio Valley. And that's kind of the average track. And that's also the area we'll be focusing on over the next several days. So basically, in that red circle is the areas we're watching here. Maybe not into Tennessee that much, but more into like Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, parts of the Dakotas, and maybe into northeastern Montana. Those would be the areas I would be focused on in this type of a pattern. And even for most of these areas here, even if you don't see severe weather, you'll likely be impacted by some excessive heat as well. Temperatures will be very warm over some of those areas as well. So that's the GFS sawmills. Let's check out the European sawmills. Pretty much a very similar thing here for the next 10 days here. Very similar track here. Some of those higher precipitation anomalies kind of start in North Dakota. They go through parts of Minnesota, Wisconsin. They kind of back off a little bit when they get closer to Great Lakes, but they do pick up again as you kind of get into the Ohio Valley. So that's kind of your average track here. So pretty similar to the GFS ensembles here. So that's a pretty decent mean here. So that kind of gives you an idea. Okay, let's talk about the GFS model itself. And you can see here, this gives you a slightly better idea. Now, this will change from run to run here, but you kind of get an idea of some of these tracks here, of some of these clusters of thunderstorms here, especially where you see some of those higher rainfall totals out there as well, in those red and brown shades as well. And you can see here, it's kind of falls along with some of its ensemble members as well. They go around that ridge of high pressure. That's also what we call the ring of fire, where cluster thunderstorms go around the ridge. But I think the most particular model to probably have a better representation of this pattern here will probably I would go with the European model. You kind of see this a little bit better. You got some cluster thunderstorms that may try to start off possibly as far north as southern Canada, maybe back as far west as Montana, but they really kind of get going in the parts of Dakotas. Let me get a different color here of the pen here. Let's do yellow. Let's see if it shows up a little bit better for some people. Maybe a little hard to see. So you can see here they kind of start up into parts of the Dakotas. They move southeastward for parts of Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, Illinois, maybe into parts of southern Michigan. And then they kind of turn a tad bit more south as they get into parts of Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, even the parts of West Virginia could see some of that action as well. So you can see here the area I've highlighted in yellow. That's the area I'll probably be a little bit more concerned about, or the area to watch in that yellow shade there, or in that yellow box, wherever you want to call it. But that's definitely the area I would really pay attention to over the next several days. And this could last for a long time too. I think this has the potential to last a little over a week, this particular pattern here. So it'll be very interesting to see how long this lasts here. But regardless of that, it is that is a pretty active pattern. It really is. And this could also lead to some flooding problems because you probably know some of the GFS model and the European model, they do show some of these isolated higher totals. Like generally it's 1 to 2 inches, but you got some areas that see, possibly up to 5 inches rain in some places. And that could lead to some flooding problems. And Mexico convective systems, they do typically bring a lot of rain. And here's the European model from a precipitation type standpoint, and this kind of gives you an idea of what it could look like. And you can see here's some cluster of thunderstorms in the upper Midwest and over plains. On Monday, you can see here how some of them do continue for a long time. They do move into the Ohio Valley by almost the next day. You can see here's more cluster thunderstorms down to parts of the Ohio Valley, the Midwest. There's more to form back up into parts of the Northern Plains in the Midwest. Some of them do move into the Ohio Valley. You can see here how this just keeps on going for several days, and even some of them cluster thunderstorms form like over the parts of southern Saskatchewan, and even some of it do continue pretty far as well. And you even have some cluster thunderstorms that may try to form over parts of the Ohio Valley. And you can see here how this is a pretty continuous pattern here, even into the 10-day period, of how that's a very continuous pattern. But don't pay too much, once again, don't pay too much attention to these particular clusters here. They will change, but I'm just showing you guys here just to kind of give you guys an idea of what we could be dealing with over the next several days. And it really begins on Monday on this type of pattern, or it could happen or start as early as Monday or maybe Tuesday. It's going to be one of those days. Okay, last but not least, we're going to check out the Climate Prediction Center Outlook. This is the 6 to 10 day temperature probabilities. You can see here, there's a lot of orange and reds on this map, which I would agree. When you have a big ridge like that over parts of the Rockies, it's going to bring in widespread heat or widespread above normal temperatures. Really, the only areas that's going to see below normal temperatures will be the Northeast. You guys will be underneath some troughing out there as well, which will lead to some pretty pleasant conditions up there. Here's those precipitation anomalies here. You can see here where some of your higher probabilities do go around that ridge of high pressure as well. And unfortunately for areas in the southern plains and even the parts of the western U.S., things will turn drier, which is not going to be good news for areas that's dealing with some drought issues. But for areas that live in the Ohio Valley and the Midwest that's dealing with some drought issues, this is actually some good news. We might actually be able to kill this drought off that we currently have ongoing, which has recently expanded quite a bit as well. Personally, in my area, we're currently in a moderate drought, and there's a chance we might knock that drought out of the park here sometime later this week. So there's at least some good news there. Days 8 through 14, so this is from July 8th to the 14th. Pretty similar outlook here. However, some of those warmer temperatures do spread farther to the east as well, and this is pretty typical in July, where you have a ridge of high pressure that develops in the four corner states that kind of move to the central U.S., and that kind of pushes some of those cluster thunderstorms farther to the northeast as well, so possibly some of the Great Lakes could get involved as well as you get into mid-July. And here's those precipitation anomalies here, or probabilities, I should say. You can see here a decent amount of green in the northeastern U.S., but you also notice that the probabilities are not very high as well. So 33 to 40% chance, but you kind of get the idea here a little bit here. It could be active across the Northern Plains, Upper Midwest, Ohio Valley, even the parts of the Southeast, which in the Southeast, it'd be more summertime variety showers and thunderstorms, or popcorn thunderstorms down there. Could be a similar situation up in the parts of the Northeast as well. But once again, there's still plenty of time for changes out there as well. And here's our probability outlook as well. This will kind of give you an idea what this ridge of high pressure will do. And one of the bigger things is widespread heat. In that orange shade here, you can see it covers a lot of real estate across parts of the central and western U.S. That's a slight risk for excessive heat. In that red shade, that's a moderate risk for excessive heat. In that dark red shade, that's a high risk for excessive heat. In the areas in the dark red, we could see heat index values that could be deep in the hundreds. Some areas may have a chance to get a heat index value at least of 110. as well. But generally, I think heat index values would be 105 to 110. But the actual temperature could also get into the low hundreds as well in a lot of areas. So with this big ridge of high pressure developing, it will lead to widespread heat issues. It will also lead to some drought issues. You notice here there's some of these little yellow shade areas out here. That's an indication for a rapid drought, and that's not so good news out there as well for some of those areas that could see rapid drought as well. Y'all also had these little light green shades here. You got one over parts of the Midwest and the Northern Plains, and there's another area for parts of Arizona. That's a slight risk for heavy precipitation. And for at the moment here, the CPC had the greatest confidence area for heavy precipitation over parts of Northern Plains, Upper Midwest, as well. But I think that could easily get extended into parts of the Ohio Valley as well, if I'm going to be honest, out there as well. Because here in the Ohio Valley, if we don't really experience much ways cluster thunderstorms, we could still see some summertime showers of thunderstorms, popcorn showers of thunderstorms out there as well. But regardless of that, the potential is there. We could see a very active pattern as well. So once again, if you do live in the Northern Plains, most of the Midwest, into the Ohio Valley, definitely keep an eye on the forecast over the next several days because we do have that potential to see multiple rounds of showers of thunderstorms, and some of those can be severe as well. But anyways, guys, that's all for you guys today. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Guys, like this video, hit the like button. If you do like my channel, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notifications so you never miss an upload. If you guys have questions about this, put a comment section down below. I answer you guys questions. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye and have a good day.